Więc udało się, słuchajcie, naszą gościnią jest Rientke z Partii Zielonych, z niemieckiej Partii Zielonych, europarlamentarzystka. Hello Terry, how are you?
I'm very good. I just miss being with people, as most of us probably.
Yeah, we just talked about that just a few minutes ago, that we really would like to just be in a crowded place with drunk people all over us and just having fun and just making loud noises.
Yes.
That would be fun. That would be fun. But let me just ask you about the coronavirus. That's actually an interesting question, because we don't get that much update when it comes to other countries, what's going on in other countries. So I was wondering what's going on in Germany when it comes to coronavirus situation, how it's going on right now.
I think a lot of people were hoping that it would be getting better, but now lately the numbers are actually going up again because of these mutants, as you probably know.
Yeah.
And I think that this dream that already in spring we could open up everything again, it's not going to become reality. So the situation is actually pretty difficult right now.
So is Germany like closing down, locking down again, or?
Well, we haven't really gone out of the restrictive measures yet. This was maybe planned for next month, but now we will have to see what kind of measures will be agreed on. As you know, Germany is a federal state, so this is always a little bit of a coordination effort also.
I get it.
So we will see about that. Obviously, I mean, I can just say we need to do everything that needs to be done to fight this virus, but at the same time, I can also really see that, especially for certain groups, this situation is really difficult.
How is going? The question I'm going to ask is about the vaccination process. How is going on? First of all, in Germany, that's interesting for me as well, especially when it comes to federation being the country being a federation. And second of all, how would you evaluate the vaccination process in Europe in general?
Well, I would say maybe it's not directly comparable, but you can certainly see similarities, because I think there has been a coordination effort that might not have worked at all times, both on the German level, so on this federal engagement level, as well as on the European level. I believe that not falling into this vaccination nationalism, so not all countries kind of bidding against each other for the vaccination, was a good move. But then in the actual implementation, I think obviously we should have been faster. And I can tell you that the European Parliament puts as much pressure as possible on the Commission, so we can really get the vaccination out and then people can get vaccinated, because this is obviously an important step in order to get back to something close to normal life eventually.
Vatican City, which is not a member of the European Union, but decided that if you're not vaccinated and you don't have like a proper medical reason for that, you won't be able to work. You are going to be fired. What do you think about the ideas like that?
Well, first of all, there is a good reason why Vatican is not part of the European Union, because it's not a democratic state.
That's true. That's true.
You know that women cannot even hold positions there.
That's true.
So I'm very happy that we don't have countries like that inside of the European Union. No, but I think this is. As much as I can see that people are discussing and thinking about that, I think it's a very dangerous road to go down on, because we always have to see that there is kind of a frictionless relationship between obviously collective interest, but also individual rights that people have. And I think that this will be a debate that is not easy to be solved. And I think that there will also be a lot of broader societal discussions to be had on this. But I would tell you that for now, I really think we need to try to keep the society together, get the virus under control, get people vaccinated, and then try with smart measures, coordinated measures as a European Union together to get out of this situation.
A few weeks ago, we had a small scandal when dozens of artists here in Poland were vaccinated before anyone else. They were vaccinated when during the time when only medical staff was supposed to be vaccinated. Does things like this, like some situations with the preferential treatment, happen in other places as well? Some things like that?
Well, I think there have been reports like this, but very often it was just that maybe some people didn't show up, they still had the vaccination, and then they still had suddenly like short notice slots open, and then they just vaccinated additional people. So sometimes they brought the fire brigade or some other people. Obviously, we have to look very closely that there is a system that makes sense and that is being enforced properly. But I had the feeling also sometimes this was, at least in the debates that I have seen, maybe blown up a little bit. I believe that, again, we have to get people vaccinated as fast as possible. There need to be clear criteria how to do that. And then, I mean, in the end, I think it's really on all of us, because I really believe it's true. We are in this together. So we cannot believe that, you know, if there is a part of the world that is far ahead, this is going to, you know, make this part of the world open up again and everything is fine, because in the end there are, you know, movements and there is exchange between all parts of the world, especially inside of the European Union. So let's try to get this done as fast as possible in Europe and the whole world, that we have a proper vaccination level and then we get the virus under control.
Yeah. Changing the topic a bit, were you happy about the results of the American election process?
You bet I was. Well, let me say, I was with the end result. I mean, Joe Biden is president now and Kamala Harris is vice president, which I think is even more of a story for me. But I mean, looking at the situation, still, I don't know how you felt, but so many people in the US voting for somebody like Donald Trump, really being gaslighted, being lied to, being kind of entangled in all kinds of conspiracy theories. I think that this is something that, despite the fact that the result, the overall result in the end is good, also especially for transatlantic relations and for human rights all across the globe, I think we really have to look at the causes of why people like Donald Trump, for example, get into power. And we really have to work on that, because if we have people like that, I believe our democracies as a whole are under attack. And we could see that very clearly in January when the Capitol was sieged and then stormed by Trump supporters. I think we really have to stand very firm on rule of law, on democracy and fundamental rights. This is not only a problem in Europe, this is a problem all across the world.
And I'm getting to the rule of law in a few seconds, but I wanted to ask you if Jarosław Kaczyński is the Polish equivalent of Donald Trump for you. Do you think they are similar in any ways?
Well, I think they have at least shown a certain level of sympathy towards each other. So, you know, not me intervening and giving a judgment. I think they seem to think that. I would still say that there is a difference in the way how different authoritarian leaders, and I would call both of them that. There is this new wave of authoritarianism. Donald Trump is like a phenomenon in this. We have, you know, Brexit, Nigel Farage, who's also a part of this. We have Viktor Orban, we have Kaczynski in Poland. I think that we have these kind of different forms of it. They are not all the same, and I think it would be like, it wouldn't show the complexity of the phenomenon if we would just believe it's all the same. But I think that there are very strong similarities, and we have to try to see these similarities and then also try in the countering of it to see what worked in the US and how can we maybe bring over certain narratives, how we can have campaigns together, how we can have this cross-border solidarity, because I think in the end that's going to be crucial to stand up to it.
Maybe we should just import Kamala Harris here to Europe, and that would be something.
Definitely.
Yeah. So while talking about Poland, well, me personally, I've been an LGBTQ activist for many years now. I'm really old, and for me, the situation of non-heteronormative people here in Poland went from bad to really bad. I mean, it was getting kind of better around 2000, I don't know, 9, 10, maybe 11, but now things are really going south. So I was wondering, what's your perspective on that? Why is it happening? What do you think about that? Why did it happen?
Well, you see, I have a very similar impression of the situation, and I also have the feeling that, and I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but I also think I'm speaking for really parts of the community, that a lot of people thought that, you know, there is only one way that this can go. Like, you know, we have all the arguments, we have, you know, like it's all on our side. History is on our side. And we have seen that, yes, we won a lot of battles. Like there's so many things to celebrate. If we look at the whole of Europe, when it comes to LGBTI rights. And also, yes, there was progress in Poland, very clearly. I mean, if you compare what a Pride in Warsaw looked like 20 years ago to what it still looks like today, there is progress. But at the same time, we could also very clearly see that this one-way line of events, this is not just a one-way street. This can go the other way around. And this is what is happening in Poland. I think a very well-orchestrated, well-funded counterattack on LGBTI rights was basically very systematically executed in Poland. You have all the common narratives, and you know, the church being implied in this, numerous organizations, right-wing organizations being implied with this, political parties, politicians, and I think that there you can see that, you know, all these things that we have fought for, that we have won over the past years, they're not just there. We cannot take them for granted. And in this wave of authoritarianism, LGBTI issues, minority issues in general, have always been one of the first attack points. Because, you know, they identify maybe who is the most vulnerable in a society, and then they go for that. And I think that this is why it's so crucial what is happening with LGBTI issues in Poland right now, because this is really going to be a learning situation, you know? Are we going to show to these right-wing authoritarian movements, no, we as democratic societies are going to stand with minorities, including the LGBTI minority, or we are just going to make it a niche issue, we don't care about it enough, and then we just let them do it there, and then, you know, go further on, as we can already see in Poland now, also attacking other groups. And I think this is why it's so important that we have a strong reaction to the situation in Poland, but also in other European countries, obviously.
Many members of European Parliament, as far as I remember, you included, have visited Pride in Poland many times. And that's always a great pleasure and honor, of course, to have you there. But I'm wondering, since Poland is one of the most, if not the most, homophobic country in European Union or in Europe in general, and things are not really going good right now. So what do you think? Of course, the pressure from the international community is very important. It's absolutely crucial to remind our government that we are part of something bigger, and the things that are getting us together as the European Union are values, and then those values are for example, a non-discrimination rule. So, what do you think? I know it's difficult to answer that question, but what do you think should happen or could happen to change the situation in Poland, to shift it from really, really bad to at least somehow bad? I mean, I'm realistic. I know it's not going to be great, like, you know, tomorrow in the morning. So I'm just trying, you know, to make a slow steps forward. So what do you think? What would be the best strategy, or maybe strategies to implement?
I think you're already pointing at the right factor. I think we need strategies, because I think there is not this one recipe and then, you know, we get it out and then everything is solved. I think what I always insist on is that the European Commission has to act, so that we have a strong European reaction when it comes to fundamental rights of EU citizens, also when it comes to the rule of law and independence of judiciary questions that are ongoing right now. And this is why, as a European Parliament, we try to put pressure there. But I think we also need a broader strategy. And one of the things that we have really focused on as an LGBTI intergroup in the European Parliament, I mean, we are cross-party, cross-member state. We have always said that, yes, parliamentary, legislative, political processes are important for us, but we also are there to support the community. Because in the end, it's the activists and the organizations and the people on the ground who can turn this around, because, it's not going to be solved in Brussels. It can only be solved in Poland in the end. And this is why it's so important that we work very closely with these activists. And let me just give one very concrete example, which at least in my perspective worked in some cases well. And that was not to come from the European level and interact with, Polish politicians or Polish authorities, but to do it from a local level, peer-to-peer. So to have partner cities of certain Polish cities, regions, villages, to get into a dialogue about human rights, including LGBTI rights, with people from the local council, maybe in a city that has declared itself LGBTI ideology free. And I think that this is a kind of approach that is more really based on, look, we have similar issues to deal with. We are local authorities. We sit in a local council. What are you working on? And I can tell you that then maybe you also don't have this narrative that is so often coming that, from above, they're telling us to do this. No, it's the people working on the same level that are working together on an exchange basis across Europe, and that say that human rights are a crucial part also of local administration. And this is why such declarations and resolutions cannot be tolerated inside of the European Union.
That's intriguing because some of the cities or towns that were declared LGBT-free zone right now are thinking over their decision because of the Norwegian funds Norwegian funds that are being taken away because of that. And one of the places was trying to reverse that, but the members of the local authorities said no, we will stay with that LGBT-free zone shit. But people in this town decided that they want to do something about that. So they gathered together, they created some kind of association or whatever, and they are trying to reverse it as a civil society movement. So that's great because they do understand. Of course, money are very important as an issue as well, but they just think that it's bad to be free of any kind of people zone if you want to just exclude anyone. So I really do. But when I think about the situation getting worse and worse in Poland is that we have more and more allies right now, and they are getting more and more vocal, and that's fantastic. That's really great. And I was going to ask you about your personal involvement. Why are you involved in LGBT issues in Poland? Why is it important for you personally? Or maybe it's not. Maybe I'm just projecting something, but I think it is.
No, definitely it is. Because Poland is one of my favorite countries in the world.
Oh, is it?
Yes, definitely. I come from an area in Germany where there has always been, traditionally, hearing Polish around you when you are in a city like Gelsenkirchen is a very, very an everyday life experience. And I think that there are a lot of things about Polish culture that I really like. So I think I come from a very positive and loving place, and now I see all of this happening, and it's something that that's why maybe it touches me even more. But obviously, also maybe alongside to that, I believe that, and that's really important for me to say, it is not something that is only happening isolated in Poland or in Poland and Hungary. Yeah. I think that these sorts of narratives that Polish politicians are, for example, using, they are more and more also being used in other member states, and not only in Eastern Europe. You also have that right now. I mean, in Germany, we have a far-right force sitting in the Bundestag, who tell very similar tales about how we are a threat to society, to family, to Christianity, and stuff like this. So I think there is a case to be made. And as I said, if we don't intervene in an early stage, if we don't say now up until here and not further, this can actually have a detrimental effect that can obviously have very, very negative consequences for Polish democracy, but I believe for European democracy as a whole. Because really, as you said, the fundament of why the European Union works, why we have a functional single market, why we have so much economic exchange, is that you have democratic institutions that people can trust in, that you have an independent judiciary, that there are fundamental rights, that people, wherever they go, they can pin their finger on and say, this is my right. This is the basis of the European project. This is the basis of European democracy. And this is why I believe, next to that I love Poland and that I'm very, very, close to the Polish community as well, I also see this broader picture, and this is why I'm so engaged.